As we move into scene two of this play, we see things get a little bit more complicated um, between all of the members of the family. And so, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of give a quick breakdown of the kind of plot points of it, and then we're going to move and look at some of the individual moments here that I think are important to kind of spend some time with. So let's just kind of go through some of the plot points of scene two. So scene two is going to take place the following day, which, as we might note, is the day that the check is supposed to come. In the beginning, we see the family kind of cleaning up. They're spraying insecticide to get all the bugs out, just generally kind of spiffing things up. One of the things that I think we're meant to take from this is that they're preparing for this large-scale change in their lives. Ruth isn't there. Travis asks where she is. Mama gives kind of a vague answer about that she was at the doctor, but mentions that she ain't never been wrong about a woman. And as they're cleaning, they kind of discuss the sorry state of the house and the neighborhood. At one point, Benita says that the only way to make things better would be to set fire to the building. Benita gets a call from one of her boyfriends, this guy, Joseph Asagai, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. Ruth comes back. Turns out why she fainted, she was pregnant. Mom is overjoyed, but Ruth and Benita are kind of worried about this, the kind of practical realities of this situation. One of the things is they're just kind of getting in the clear, having this extra money, and now they're going to have another kid. Another thing is that they already don't have enough room. And then the third thing is that things between Ruth and Walter are not so great right now. So we're going to talk in a few minutes about Asagai. He's an interesting character. He shows up and he brings Benita a package. It turns out he's been off for a while. And he's bringing her kind of some presents. When she opens this, she finds these African robes and some music, and he kind of instructs her in the way of kind of getting into these African robes. And I think one of the things we're meant to see in Asagai is this kind of alternative path. Alternative kind of form, alternative kind of like being in touch with another culture that the younger family has been in some ways alienated from. And in fact, like he makes fun of Benita because her hair isn't natural. He calls her an assimilationist and says that she just wants to be like white people. But he does have strong feelings for her. And he even gives her a nickname in his native language, which is from the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria, which the nickname means one for whom food or bread is not enough. The thing is that Asagai wants her to get in touch with this kind of cultural heritage that he says that she is just kind of completely alienated from. So is in some ways alienated from a part of herself. And I think we're going to get a kind of a deeper idea of that when Mama starts talking to Asagai, because she doesn't really know what to make of him. And when he tells her that he's from Nigeria, she's confused. She can't really picture Africa outside of kind of like images that she's seen in movies, or like these Tarzan movies, which I think are interesting because these are the images that I think she conjures up are these images that white people have constructed of Africa. And so what we see, like what Asagai is kind of part of his purpose is here, is to show the kind of uh, the way that um, African Americans in this play and in America are not only kind of suffering from this kind of segregation and alienation from their abilities, their true potential, but also kind of alienated from their self. That this country has taken people, has taken people, enslaved them, and the kind of one of the kind of more terrible things that it's done has it has taken away their past and kind of erased that past. So after all this happens, the check finally arrives. This kind of movement from a sort of potential energy to a sort of kinetic energy in the plot. One of the things that we'll see here is with the arrival of the check, things kind of speed up a little bit in the play. Mama, she's nervous to open it. She's never had this much money at one time before. She even says that, she doesn't really know what to do with it. If she didn't have a family here, she'd probably just give it to the church. But Ruth Ruth is there, and they talk a little bit about a doctor's visit. And Mama notices that Ruth kind of has a slip of the tongue and says that the doctor she went to is a woman, which is not her usual doctor. Her usual doctor is a man. Of course, Walter comes in, and the only thing he really wants to know about is this money. And he talks about his liquor store, and Mama says, "No, I don't really want to invest in that." And then Walter gets angry, and Ruth gets angry, and Mama gets angry, and then attempts to kind of intervene. And Ruth kind of storms off, and Mama sits down with Walter and attempts to get him to talk about what he actually wants out of life. And Walter's answer is money. He sees money as this kind of ticket to progress, to forward momentum. And Mama, on the other hand, believes that what she wants is this kind of idea of freedom and family. And I think that something to kind of note here is that Walter is, I think Walter's kind of idea is that money can buy these things. And Mama's idea is that, well, we need to think about the ends. And Walter's idea is, well, the ends, the means will justify the ends. The means will lead to these ends that we want. But as far as this, his only focus is money. He kind of like doesn't really focus on that idea of freedom, on that idea of family. In fact, when he finds out that Ruth is pregnant, and Mama kind of lets slip that this thing about the doctor, and that she suspects that Ruth is going to have an abortion. Because of her concern about her relationship with Walter and all this financial stuff, and kind of ruining this kind of finely constructed pathway out that they might have. And Walter is upset. He's angry, and Ruth comes down and says, "Yes, this is true, and I've even put $5 down for the procedure. I've started getting this. I've put money down so that I can get this procedure." And Mama wants Walter to tell Ruth not to do it. Wants him to kind of assert a sort of adulthood, a sort of control over Ruth, but he just storms out. So we're going to take a look at a few of the moments from this act, and kind of unpack a few ideas here. So I want to look at a couple of moments from this scene, and the first kind of pair of moments that I want to look at are the ones that talk about and feature Joseph Asagai, who is one of Beneatha's boyfriends, who is he's from Africa. And we talked about this a little bit in one of the previous slides. But what I want to kind of draw our attention, there's a couple of things that I want to draw our attention to here. I think in kind of bringing in this character of Asagai, Lorraine Hansberry is, I think she's very much kind of speaking autobiographically a little bit. We talked earlier about how her uncle was one of these was a pioneer in African studies. But I think what we also see is this kind of dawning of kind of a Pan-Africa movement, and a kind of dawning of this kind of realization that for African Americans in America, that not only had there been kind of a mental, emotional, physical enslavement, but also a kind of complete erasure of culture and the past and heritage. And I think this is one of the things that we're going to see in Joseph Asakai, because what he's kind of doing is showing this to Beneatha. And I think this is important for a couple reasons. One of which is that it kind of broadens Beneatha's point of view about what she is, who she can become. And the other thing is that it gives the family an opportunity to exhibit or show just how kind of deep this separation from one's history is. We see that the mother really doesn't know anything about Africa. She mixes up Nigeria and Liberia. She is like, and we said this before, she, like many people, the only kind of evidence, the only kind of images they've seen of Africa are these images that white people have created. And so there's not, there's really not a kind of consciousness of images of of Africa, or ideas about Africa that are created by Africans, or by people who are descendants of Africa. So that's one thing that I want us to kind of pay attention to here. The other thing that I want us to pay attention to is the ways in which, in some ways, Beneatha's relationship with Asagai kind of mirrors, replicates a lot of her other relationships with men, and we'll see this in kind of when we meet George Murchison, and also clearly in her brother Walter. But yeah, in the fact that I think that there's this kind of ultimate kind of controlling force that is exerted on her by men, and that as a Black woman, she is kind of doubly displaced. She has to wait for men to affirm her and her particular search for identity. So let's just take a look at this kind of pair of clips.
Hello. Oh, well, howdy do to you too. Oh, no. No, I'm sorry. House cleaning and all that. My mama hates it if I have anyone to come over when the house looks like this.
That's right.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well, that's different, but... Well, look, what the heck? You just come right on over. Right. Okay, I'll see you in a little while. Yeah. Arrivederci.
Who in the world is that you inviting over here with this house looking like this? You ain't got the pride you was born with.
Asagai doesn't care how houses look. He's an intellectual.
Who?
Asagai. Joseph Asagai. He's an African boy I met on campus.
What's his name?
Asagai. Joseph Asagai. He's from Nigeria.
Oh, yes. That's that little old country that was founded by the slaves way back
Mama.
before.
That's Liberia.
I don't think I never seen me no African before.
Well, then you just do me a favor. Don't you ask him a whole lot of ignorant questions about Africans. I mean, do they wear clothes and all that stuff?
Well, now, if you think we're so ignorant around here, maybe you shouldn't bring your friends here.
Well, Mama, it's just that people ask such crazy things. All anyone seems to know about when it comes to Africa is Tarzan.
Well, why should I know anything about Africa?
Well, now, why do you give money at church for the missionary work?
Well, that's to help save folks.
You mean save them from heathenism?
That's right.
I'm afraid they need more salvation from the foreigners on their lands.
Hello, Alayo.
Hello. Well, come on in. Oh, and, please excuse everything. My mother was so upset about not having anyone to come here with the house looking like this.
And you seem disturbed too. Is there something wrong?
Yeah, we've all got acute ghettoitis.
Oh.
Well, so sit down. What'd you bring me?
Open it and see.
Oh, you got it for me. Oh, it's beautiful. And the records, too.
Of course.
Thank you very much. I'll put it on.
No. Here, I shall have to teach you how to drape it properly. Come. You take it like so. And we drape it around here. That's enough. Tuck it here. Oh, Pegede Ogbamushe. You wear it well, very well.
You really think so?
Oh, do you remember when I first met you at school? You came up to me and you said, and I thought you were the most serious little thing I'd ever seen. You said, Mr. Asagai, I should like very much to talk with you about Africa. You see, Mr. Asagai, I am looking for my identity.
Yes?
Well, it's true that this is not so much the profile of a Hollywood queen as, say, the Queen of the Nile, huh? Well, what does it matter? Assimilationism is so popular in your country.
I am not an assimilationist.
Such a serious one. So, you like the robes. You must take excellent care of them. They're from my sister's personal wardrobe.
You sent all the way home for me.
Oh, well, for you, I'd do much more. Well, that's what I came for. I must go.
Well, you call me Monday.
Oh, well, yes, of course. We have a great deal to talk about, you and I.
Yes.
I mean, about identity and all that. Yes, and time.
Time.
Yes. How much time one needs to know what one feels.
You see? You see, you never understood. There's more than one kind of a feeling that can exist between a man and a woman.
No.
Or at least there should be.
No, between a man and woman, there need be only one kind of feeling. And I have that for you. Now even, right this moment.
I know, and then by itself it won't do. I can find that any place.
For a woman, it should be enough.
I know, and that's because that's what it says in all the novels that men write. But it isn't. Well, you just go ahead and laugh, but I'm not interested in being someone's little episode in America. Or one of them. It's real funny, huh?
No. It's just that every American woman I have ever met has always said that to me. And this, you are all the same. And the same speech, too.
Yuck, yuck, yuck.
You know, it's how you can tell that the world's most liberated woman is not liberated at all. You all talk about it too much.
It's my mother. Mama? This is Mr. Asagai.
How do you do?
How do you do, Mrs. Younger? Please forgive me for coming at such an outrageous hour on a Saturday.
Oh, that's quite all right, quite all right. I just hope you understand our house don't always look like this.
Yes, of course.
You must come again. I'd love to hear all about your country. I think it's so sad the way our American Negroes don't know nothing about Africa except Tarzan and all that. And all that money they pour in these churches when they ought to be helping you folks over there drive out them foreigners done took away your land.
Yes, of course.
How many miles is it from here to where you come from?
Well, many thousands.
Bet you don't half take care of yourself neither, being away from your mama so far. Well, I expect you better come around here from time to time and get yourself some home-cooked meals.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I really must be going. I'll call you Monday, Alaio.
What's that he called you?
Oh, Alaio. I hope you don't mind. It's what you would call a nickname, I think. It's a Yoruba word. I'm Yoruba.
I thought you said he come from...
Oh, well, Nigeria is my country. Yoruba is my tribal origin.
Oh, you never did tell us what Alaio means. For all I know, you might be calling me a little idiot or something.
Oh, well, let me see. I don't know if I can explain it. You see, the sense of a thing is sometimes quite different when it changes languages.
You're evading.
No, really, it's quite difficult. It means one for whom food is not enough. Is that all right?
Thank you.
Well, that's nice. You must come again, Mr.
Asagai. Asagai.
Yes, well, do come again.
Call me.
Oh, that sure was a pretty thing that just walked out of here. I see how come we done become so interested around here in Africa all of a sudden. Missionaries, Ma, Jenny.
Oh, Mama.
So a couple of things to notice here in these scenes. One is, okay, so we have this kind of lack of understanding of Africa from Mama, except the kind of, I don't know, imagery from films or imagery from the church, right? The kind of missionary work. And I think Benita kind of scores this point when they're talking. They have this kind of momentary conversation about missionary work. She says that the people in Africa, they don't need missionary work. They need for salvation. They need salvation from the foreigners on their land. And I think that this is, I think that this is Benita kind of taking up really a kind of radical standpoint here. As we move into the second clip, we see a sort of we meet Joseph Asagai, and I'm not exactly sure how we're supposed to feel about him, because there is this kind of mystery about him, right? And there is this kind of idea that he is this ticket to a sort of liberation or a kind of cultural, historical recovery for Benita. Um, but and as a matter of fact, before I go any further, as a matter of fact, we kind of see this in the gift that he brings her, these kind of African robes, and we later find this kind of African music from Nigeria. Um, and he goes on to kind of teach her how to kind of properly drape, properly wear um, this um, these robes. And in a certain way, we see her kind of kind of performing African in a way, in this idea that this performance will lead to a sort of enlightenment. Um, so that's kind of one side of him, right? The kind of benevolent side of him. Um, on the other hand, right, and this is what I was talking about before. In some ways, we see him as being kind of just the same thing um, as all of the other men who are around. Um, we don't see this um, in the this film version, um, but in the play, when he calls her an assimilationist, he specifically targets her hair. Um, he says that her hair is not natural, and this is clearly this is a big and important kind of cultural idea. Um, but so this is kind of criticism from him to her. And we kind of note that there's a kind of like desire for sort of control of her body, right? That he wants to dress her up. He wants to kind of form her in this perfect way. And he wants to kind of form her into, as he says, an African queen. Um, which might sound okay, except for the fact that she doesn't really have a kind of a sense of agency or input on that. Um, we also see him being kind of incredibly patronizing, really. When he talks about he talks about the first time they met, and he says, I thought you were the most serious little thing I had ever seen." Right? We have this um, kind of oxymoronic, but definitely this kind of idea of a little thing. And what we're going to hear is the more he talks, the more we hear this idea of serious being kind of dismissive. Um, and he also says, most serious little thing that I've ever seen, um, and that he kind of mocks her a little bit, saying that she wanted to know about Africa because she's looking for her identity, and he kind of laughs at this. Um, and when he accuses her of being an assimilationist, and she kind of stands up for herself and says, I'm not an assimilationist." And his only response is to kind of like shake his head and smile and say, "So serious," right? So this kind of "so serious" kind of becomes this kind of dismissive rhythm through the scene. Um, and then there's this kind of exchange between them, which I think is pretty telling, um, where they're talking about there being more than one feeling that can exist between a man and a woman. Asagai says, "We have a great deal to talk about. I mean, about identity." We kind of get this feeling that when he says identity there, he's kind of being, again, a little patronizing, and time. And he says about Benitez says, and time. Sagai says, yeah, about how much time one needs to know what one feels. And Benitez says, you see, you never understand that there is more than one kind of feeling that which can exist between a man and a woman, or at least there should be. And then Asagai, he just shakes his head dismissively. Um, in the stage directions of the play, it says shaking his head negatively but gently. So we kind of get this idea, like they're talking, like he's talking to a child. No, he says, between a man and a woman there need only be one kind of feeling, and that I have for you, now even, right at this moment. Benita says, I know, and by itself it won't do. I can find that anywhere. He says, for a woman that should be enough. And Benita says, I know, because that's what it says in all the novels that men write, but it isn't. Go ahead and laugh. But I'm not interested in being someone's little episode in America, or one of them. And then he's laughing at her, and she says, that's funny, huh? Um, we see here this kind of moment of she's kind of attempting to exert a sort of control of her identity, a sort of agency, right? That she can determine the kinds of feelings that she has vis-a-vis a relationship with a man or with anyone. Um, and she points out this kind of very true thing that the only reason you think that women are like this is because this is what culture says, but culture is largely controlled by men, and so it becomes this kind of when the cultural representation gets mistaken for the reality, um, it erases the real feelings, the real identity, the real agency of the women. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about the fact that um, this is an intersectional play, right? That it's not only about this idea of this kind of working class family. It's not only about the kind of oppression that black families in the 1950s um, really throughout the 20th century feel. Um, it's also about the way that these kind of exert different kinds of pressure on different people, and the way that people are um, subjected to kind of modes of oppression differently. And what we see here is that even the kind of um, kind of quote unquote enlightened Asagai still kind of re-exerts this kind of um, uh, power structure that oppresses women, this kind of patriarchy that oppresses women. Um, and it's I like at the end of this moment that when Mama comes in and kind of performs what Beneath has told her about it being more than Tarzan and the thing about the missionaries. And then just a kind of final note on this nickname, right? It is one for whom for whom food is not enough, and I think that actually kind of gets to Benita pretty well in some ways. That for her, it's more about this kind of it's more than this physical survival. We need this survival of the self, this survival of the ego, of agency, this kind of survival of identity and discovering of identity. So let's turn now to the kind of thing that kind of pushes the plot ahead, the kind of the story ahead, which is the arrival of this Czech. And let's just take a quick look at this scene um, and look at the ways in which um, our different characters react to this. Now, in this one part, we're only going to see Ruth and Mama and the son. We'll take a look at Walter's reaction in just a few minutes.
Well, she's resting now.
Mailman must be late, Grandma. I'm tired of waiting.
Oh, it'll be all right, honey. He'll be ringing that bell soon, just like he's been doing every day for the last umpteen years. Well, where are you going?
To become a queen of the Nile.
Who told you to get up?
Oh, ain't nothing wrong with me to be laying in no bed for. Where'd Benny go?
As far as I can make out, to Egypt.
Get down them steps, boy.
You reckon it's done come already?
Oh, Miss Slim.
Oh, no, ain't no point in us getting all excited. We know it was coming for months.
Yes, but that's a whole lot different from having it come and being able to hold it in your hand. A piece of paper worth $10,000. Come on, open it. Lord have mercy, I wish Walter Lee was here.
Open it, Grandma.
No, don't be getting excited. It's only a check.
Open it.
No, don't be acting silly now. We ain't never been a people act silly about money.
We ain't never had none before. Open it.
Travis, is them the right amount of zeros?
Yes'm. $10,000. Golly, Grandma, you're rich.
$10,000. Put it away, Ruth. $10,000 they give you. $10,000.
What's the matter with Grandma? Don't she want to be rich?
Go on downstairs and play now, baby. You done gone and got yourself upset.
You know, Ruth, I expect if it wasn't for y'all, I'd just put that money away or give it to the church or something.
Oh, what kind of talk is that? Mr. Young would be just plain mad if he could hear you talking foolish like that.
Yes, he would, wouldn't he? Oh, we got plenty to do with that money, all right.
So just a couple of important things to kind of observe in this little moment. First, Travis says, I'm tired of waiting, and I think that this is a kind of theme that moves through the entire play, really. And it certainly is a kind of sentiment that's shared by Walter Jr., Travis's father, and Walter Sr., right? The kind of the guy who died. There's this kind of tired of waiting and this kind of perhaps disbelief that this deliverance will ever come. And we see when they hear the bell ring and they know it's the postal delivery. This kind of moment of silence, of kind of anticipation, and kind of we kind of get this feeling that we can hardly believe that this is true, right? That this is actually happening. And Ruth says, we've never seen a piece of paper worth $10,000 before. And I think to kind of put this into context, I think $10,000, say 1955, would be worth something closer to $90,000 to $100,000 today. So it's definitely a lot of money and enough money to completely change someone's life. And we see this kind of fear on Mama's face of opening it. And we'll come back to that in a second. but we see this kind of fear or intimidation about opening it. And as a matter of fact, she can't even believe it when she opens it. She has to ask Travis if this is the right number of zeros. Um, but there's this moment that I think kind of like goes to this fear, this moment of hesitation in opening the envelope. Um, she looks at it and she says, $10,000. $10,000 they give you. It's kind of just kind of talking to herself almost. And then she tells Ruth to put the check away. And this idea of this $10,000 is what they give you, right? Um, and we know that this is an amount of money that can completely change lives. Um, but I think this kind of momentary pause from Mama is this um, idea that you can the $10,000 they give you, right? So we're kind of like $10,000 in exchange for what? And this $10,000 is in exchange for all of the work, all of the dreams, all of the sweat, all of the suffering of her husband. When we put it in that kind of context, we think about this idea like, what is the value of all of that? Can money really make up for that, make up for all of this heartbreak, all of this suffering, all of this waiting around for salvation to come or grace to come or just really what you've earned to come. And I think that this is, I think that this is a kind of a fundamental question. How much are our dreams worth? How much is our desire to succeed and move forward? How much is our desire to leave something better for our children? How much is that worth? Is it worth $10,000? Is it possible to put a dollar sign on it? And I think that this is kind of what Mom is thinking. And I think it's notable too that she says, if it wasn't for you, if it wasn't for you, I'd either put it away and put it in savings or something like that, or I'd just give it to the church. Um, and you kind of get the feeling that she doesn't want to deal with this, right? In some ways, right? This is the last memory of her husband, the last memory of the father of her children. Um, and then Ruth comes to say, you know, that he would be mad, right? If she didn't use it. And I think that the kind of pressure that Mama is under here, and this is the reason why she's so adamant against this liquor store thing, is that you know if somebody gave you an amount of money for your life, for all of your sweat, all of your desire, all of your suffering, what would you spend that on? What would be worth spending that on? And I think it's a really heavy question. Um, and I think that that's the kind of question that um, um, pushes Mama forward and also kind of haunts Mama and the rest of the characters throughout the rest of the play. And the last kind of moment or set of moments that I want to look at for this scene is the kind of final few minutes of the scene. And this is in the final few minutes of the scene, we see Walter Walter kind of entering with this expectation of getting the check. And throughout the course of these moments, we're going to see a kind of a set of deconstructions, a deconstruction of kind of capitalism, deconstruction of manhood and masculinity, and a kind of a deconstruction of all of these kind of pressures that are exerted upon Walter. So let's just take a look at this.
Things that she ain't got.
Did it come?
What are you doing home at this hour? And can't you give people a Christian greeting before you start asking about money?
I made Willie Harris put everything on paper, Mama. The lawyer just looked it over and everything.
Son, I think you ought to have a talk with your wife. Now go on out and leave you alone if you want.
Mama, I can talk to her anytime, Mama.
Son!
Mama, will somebody listen to me today?
I don't allow no yelling in this house, Walter Lee, and you know it. And there ain't gonna be no investing in no liquor stores. And I do not aim to have to speak on it again.
But, Mama, you haven't even looked at it. You haven't even looked at it. You haven't even looked at it and you don't even have to speak on it again? Well, you tell that to my boy tonight when you put him to sleep on the living room couch. And you tell it to him in the morning when his mother goes out of here to take care of somebody else's kids. And tell it to me when we want some curtains or some drapes and you sneak out of here and go work in somebody's kitchen. All I want is to make a future for this family. All I want is to be able to stand in front of my boy like my father never was able to do to me and tell him that he'll be somebody in this world besides a servant and a chauffeur. Huh? You tell me that, huh?
Where you going?
Out.
Where?
Just out of this house somewhere.
I'll come with you.
I don't want you.
I got something to talk to you about, Walter.
That's too bad.
Walter Lee, sit down.
I'm a grown man, Mama.
Anybody said you wasn't grown, but you are still in my house in my presence. And as long as you are, you'll talk to your wife civil. Now sit down.
Don't let him go on out and drink himself to death. You make me sick to my stomach.
Well, you turned mine too, baby. That was my biggest mistake.
Walter Lee, what is the matter with you?
Me? There's nothing the matter with me.
Yes, there is. There's something that's eating you up like a crazy man. Something more than me not giving you this money. The past few years I've been watching it happen to you. You get all nervous acting and kind of wild in the eyes. I said sit there now.
I don't need your nagging at me today. How's that?
Seems like you always tied up into some kind of knot or something. But if anybody asks you about it, you just yell at them and bust out of the house somewhere and go get drunk. Walter Lee people cannot live with that. Ruth is a nice, patient girl in her way, but you are getting to be too much. Boy, don't you make the mistake of driving that girl away from you.
What did she ever do for me?
She loves you.
Mama, I gotta go out. Now, I gotta go out and be by myself.
Son, I am sorry about your liquor store, but it just wasn't a thing for us to do. Now, that's what I wanted to tell you about. It's dangerous, son.
What's dangerous?
When a man goes outside his house to look for peace.
Well, then, how come there can never be no peace in this house?
You done found it in some other house.
Why do you always have to think there's a woman somewhere when a man... Mama? Mama, I want so many things. Oh. I want so many things that sometimes I think they're gonna drive me crazy. See, I'm 35 years old, and I ain't got nothing. I ain't gonna be nothing, Mama. Just look at me. Look at me.
I'm looking at you. And you're a good-looking boy. You got a job, a fine wife, a son.
A job. Now, I open and close car doors all day. I drive a man around in his limousine, and I say, yes, sir, and no, sir, and shall I take the drive, sir? Mama, that ain't no kind of job. That ain't nothing at all. I don't even know if I can make you understand.
Understand what, baby?
Well, sometimes it's like I can see my future just stretched out in front of me, my whole future. A big, blank, empty space full of nothing, just hanging at the edge of my days waiting for me, Mama. But it don't have to be, Mama. Sometimes when I'm downtown driving that man around, we pass them cool, quiet-looking restaurants. I look in. I see these white boys. They're sitting, talking talking about deals. Deals worth millions of dollars, Mama, and half the time they don't look no older than me.
Oh, son, how come you talk so much about money?
Because it's life.
Oh, so now money is life. Once upon a time, freedom used to be life, but now it's money.
Mama, it was always money. We just didn't know it.
No. Something's changed. You're something new, boy. In my time, we was worried about not being lynched and getting to the north and how to stay alive and still have a pinch of dignity, too. Now here come you and Benita talking about things we ain't hardly ever thought about, me and your daddy. You ain't satisfied or proud of nothing we done. I mean that you had a home and that we kept you out of trouble till you was grown. And that you don't have to ride to work on the back of nobody's streetcar. You're my children, but how different we've become.
You don't understand. You don't understand.
Son, don't you know your wife's expecting another baby? Now, that's what she wanted to talk to you about. This ain't for me to be telling, but I thought you ought to know. I think Ruth is thinking about getting rid of that child.
No, she wouldn't do that.
When the world gets ugly enough, a woman will do anything for her family, the part that's already living.
You don't know her, Mommy. You think she'd do something like that?
Yes. Yes, I would too, Walter. I gave her a $5 down payment.
Well, son, I'm waiting to hear you say something. I'm waiting to hear how you be like your father, be the man that he was. Your wife said she's gonna destroy your child. And I'm waiting to hear you talk like your father and say that we're a people who give children life, not who destroys them. I'm waiting to see you stand up and look like your daddy and say that we done give up one baby to poverty and we ain't gonna give up nary another one. I'm waiting. If you be a son of mine, you tell her. You're a disgrace to your father's memory. Where did I put my hat?
So this is where we're kind of left off at the end of the first act. And I just kind of want to go and kind of draw our attention to a couple of things here. Obviously, this is a very heavy scene, and I think that there's just so much going on here. I think that Hansberry is kind of doing so much simultaneously that it's pretty fascinating. At one point, at the beginning of this scene, Walter comes in. He doesn't say, "Is the check come yet?" He just says, "Check." This kind of idea that any other words here would be a waste, right? Because he's got it all figured out, right? He's got the plans. He's got He's got everything kind of laid out on paper, right? And I think that this is, in some ways, kind of like Walter kind of performing what he expects to be this kind of middle class business owner, right? You've got all the papers set up, got everything except you don't got the money. Um, and when Mama wants Walter to talk to Ruth about this pregnancy, she um, he says that he can talk to her later. And then later says, "Won't somebody listen to me?" We get this feeling, right, that this is something that has been bottled up. This phrase really has been bottled up in Walter for a long time. This idea that of powerlessness, really, like that you can talk and talk and talk, but no one's going to listen and nothing is going to change. Um, and Mama says no liquor store, right? And this plan, all of a sudden, it falls apart, and we see him as he kind of progresses, crumple up this paper, right? As if kind of showing that, like, this dream is so fragile, right? It can get crumpled up on a piece of paper, and we're gonna see the fragility of it as we um, get into the second and third act. Um, and Walter is, she says, no liquor store, and I don't want to speak on it again. And here we have Walter kind of get into um, this concept of pride, manhood, masculinity, his ability to take care of the family. Um, he says, you ain't even looked at it and you've decided, well, you tell that to my boy tonight when you put him to sleep on the living room couch. You tell that to my wife, Mama, tomorrow when she has to go out of here to look after somebody else's kids. And you tell that to me, Mama, every time we need a new pair of curtains and I have to watch you go out and work in somebody else's kitchen. Yeah, you tell me. You tell me then. All I want to do is to be able to stand up in front of my boy and tell him that he can be somebody besides a servant or a chauffeur. Kind of storms out, and I think what we see here is this kind of this I don't know. I guess this kind of end result of these dreams deferred, right? These dreams of, I think it's important for us to think about, like, what are the real dreams here, right? And I think that part of Walter's real dream is to be an adult, to be a man, quote unquote, right? To be the kind of person who can take care of his family and move his family up and out, even when his father couldn't do that. And so there's this kind of shame in being stuck. Um, and um, and we see this is kind of like, this is the thing that's killing Walter, really eating him up from the inside. And I think it's the same or similar kind of thing that was eating up his father from the inside. What ultimately kills him, what made his father work himself to death. Um, and Mama comes out, and she, this is kind of an amazing moment, um, where she comes out and ex- you've seen this kind of Mama moment in when she's kind of storming at Beneatha in the first scene, but this moment where she kind of stands rock solid and takes control of the entire scene, right? She says, "What's the matter with you?" Um, and she says, "There's something in you, uh, something eating you up like a crazy man, something more than not me not giving you the money, right?" And I think Mama is right to say this is more than the money, right? This is about, we're kind of still thinking kind of symbolically, right? This is what the symbol means, right? Money buying progress, freedom, agency, control. She says that this isn't something new. The past few years I've been watching it happen to you. You get all nervous, acting kind of wild in the eyes. Um, this nice moment where he tries to get up and she says, I said, sit there now when I'm talking to you. We get this feeling of Mama like really exerting her matriarchal power here. And she says that it seems like he's always tied up in some sort of knot. But if anybody asks him about it, he just yells about it and busts out of there and go drinking. So we get this feeling that this is not only a kind of sense of hopelessness, right, in which something could perhaps intervene, like the money, but almost this sense of despair. And thinking about despair in kind of maybe the kind of most extreme sense, meaning that there is absolutely no way out, that you do not justify any sort of grace or any sort of help. And it's killing Walter, right? He goes out and he just drinks. He can't even open up and share this pain with the family, right? In doing this, he is isolating himself, separating himself from the family, from really all of humanity. And Walter says, "Why can't there can't ever be any peace in this house?" And Mom says, "You done found it in some other house." And Walter says, "No, I'm not cheating on anybody." But he says, "Do you know what this money means to me? Do you know what this money can do for us? Mama, I want so many things. I want so many things. They're driving me kind of crazy. Look at me." She says, "You're a fine boy. You got a job." He says, a job. I open and close car doors all day. I drive a man around in his limousine all day. Say, yes, sir. No, sir. Very good, sir. Shall I take the drive, sir?" Talking about Lakeshore Drive, outside of Chicago. Mama, outside of the city part of Chicago, downtown. Mama, that ain't no kind of job. That ain't no kind of nothing at all. Mama, I don't know if I can make you understand. And then he goes on to say, "Sometimes it's like I can see the future stretched out in front of me, just as plain as day. The future, Mama, hanging over there at the edge of my own days, just waiting for me, a big, looming blank space full of nothing, just waiting for me. But it don't have to be." So, "Mama, when I'm downtown, I pass these cool, quiet restaurants where these white boys are sitting back. They're making deals, and they're no, millions of dollar deals, and they're not much. They don't look any older than me." And what we have here is this, in some ways, right? This frustration of being unable to actualize. And really, he talks about a future as being this kind of big blank space, um, which I think kind of suggests this like inability to even really articulate or even imagine a real future. Right? This is how this is what happens with this kind of long economic, social, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual oppression, right? Is that you can see a future, and it's stretched out kind of infinitely, right? Beautiful. Um, but there's nothing in it yet. We have yet to populate it. We can't imagine what will go in there. And I think there's this, this very real sort of kind of commentary on this sort of oppression here. And the last two things that I want to talk about in this scene, because we're getting kind of long in this lecture, is this moment when Mama says, "How come you talk so much about money?" And Walter says, "Because it's life, Mama." And Mama says, "Oh, So now it's life. Money is life. Once upon a time was freedom used to be life. Now it's money. I guess the world really do change. And Walter says, no, it was always money, Mama. We just didn't know it. Excuse me. And I think what we have here is this kind of real kind of commentary and deconstruction of the kind of um, capitalist system um, that kind of sucks in all of these people. Um, is that we kind of talked about this before with Walter and thinking about money. For Walter, um, money is kind of equals freedom. Money equals happiness. Money equals agency, right? And I think for Mama, I think probably for Beneatha some too, um, it's a means to it is a means to an end, but it is by no way the only means to that end. And what we have here, though, is that in Walter's case, I think he's been so kind of like indoctrinated, so locked into this idea of um, uh, that money is the way out, that to have something is the way out, that we don't even have these big goals anymore. We don't have these big goals of freedom or family or liberation or self actualization. It's only money. Um, and what Walter is saying, is this kind of, in some ways, cynical line that it's always been about money. Um, and Mama says, well, something's changed. You're something new, boy. In my time, we was worried about not being lynched and getting to the north if we could, or how to stay alive, how to and still have a pinch of dignity too. Now here come you and Beneatha talking all about things we never thought about, hardly. Me and your daddy. We ain't never thought about, hardly. You ain't never satisfied, never proud of anything we done. I mean, that you had a home, that we kept you out of trouble till you were grown. That you don't have to ride to work on the back of nobody's streetcar. You my children. But how different we done become. And, I think that, one of the things here, we talk about Beneatha, kind of the idea of kind of erasure of culture, erasure of the past, erasure of identity. One of the things that I think we see here is in this rush to move ahead, we don't, we see this kind of desire, particularly from Walter, but I think probably to a degree from Beneatha too. This desire to negate, this desire to, in some ways, really erase everything that their kind of immediate ancestors have gone through, right? That Mama and Daddy have gone through. That really Walter doesn't have to worry about really like literally being alive or literally having a place to go, literally having a place to stay, right? That that sacrifice, the sacrifice to get there, was made by Mama and Daddy and their parents, and that if that kind of in the rush to move forward, all of that has been forgotten. The last thing that I want to talk about here is so at the end of the scene we see Mama tell Walter that about the baby and that Ruth is thinking about having an abortion. And she he says no, she'd never do that, and then Ruth says, yeah, I would. I've already put $5 down on it. And Mama has this moment of this moment of deconstructing adulthood, deconstructing manhood for Walter, and she sees him as being kind of like his father, her husband, in a lot of ways, but doesn't see him as being kind of the adult that he needs to be, the kind of quote unquote man that he needs to be. Um, and she says things like, she's trying to tell him that he needs to talk her out of it. She says, I'm waiting to hear how you be your father's son, be the man he was. Your wife say she's going to destroy your child, and I'm waiting to hear you talk like him and say, we are people who give children life, not destroy them. I'm waiting to see you stand up and look like your daddy and say, uh, we done give up one baby to poverty. This is the baby that Mama lost. Um, and that we ain't going to give up another one. I'm waiting. And Walter literally can't, or almost can't say anything. Mama says, if you're a son of mine, tell her. He just picks up his coat and walks out. And she says, you're a disgrace to your father's memory. I think there's this moment of, like I said, kind of deconstructing this kind of expectation of adulthood, of quote unquote manhood, of and a kind of an ability to not necessarily control things and people in your household, um, but to be able to kind of make some order, to stand up for yourself, to stand up for the thing that you believe in. And I think this is the thing that Walter really doesn't have that his father did, right? Is that he gets so disappointed and angry, really petulant, almost like a child, earlier on in the scene when Mama says no about the liquor store. You know, he balls up the paper, throws it at her. He's almost kind of wailing, saying "Mama, Mama" in this moment, and then Mama exerts this again, this kind of matriarchal, motherly control over him, and it's like seeing, Walter is kind of a child here. And I think that as we go on in this play, one of the things that one of the main themes that we're going to see is a kind of journey of Walter into adulthood, into becoming the man that his father was, or being the kind of man that his father would want him to be. So that's something to kind of look out for as we move into the second and third acts. So that's it for today. Next week, we're going to be getting into Acts 2 and 3 of this play. I don't foresee the lecture next week being this long, because once we kind of get moving in this play, really the arrival of the check is kind of the moment of kind of acceleration. Things go pretty quickly here. And now that we've kind of laid out a lot of the kind of images and themes, we can just kind of go back to them. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Thank you.